introduction. And as we get started here today, I want to make sure that by all means, please stop both Renee and I. If you have any questions, we'd prefer to do those as we go along. There's some good information to cover here. And of course, we're not entirely sure as to everybody's background in the audience. So if there's something you'd like us to pivot and address, we'll do our best to do so. Again, my background is in accounting and finance, and we're going to spend some time today going over some areas of risk related to bank agreements and PPP loan type of stuff, because that's obviously at the top of everybody's mind. And Renee, I think, is going to spend a good amount of time on a number of HR-related issues, including, how do we all get back to work in various locales and situations, and what do we need to do to adhere to best practices and safety guidelines and all kinds of things like that. So, but again, by all means, we want to make this interactive and as useful for you in the audience as possible. So please feel free to stop us as we go. And with that, I'm going to share my screen and kind of kick us off here. So with that, we will hopefully start the slideshow. There we go. Again, a little bit about our firm. We have a CPA and consulting firm offices throughout Ohio, including Cleveland, Columbus, Medina, Worcester. For those of you in the Hudson area, those are probably our closest locales. So again, we touched on this, some of what we're going to cover today related to bank agreements, loan program, issues around that. I'm interested to hear your experiences in terms of what you have there. We want to be a helpful resource with regard to that. So we'll talk through some of that, as well as a number of the safety and HR issues and best practices that Renee will cover. So with that, want to talk a little bit about bank relationships. This is, I think, top of mind for everybody right now, given the, just the sudden pivot that we had from what was a pretty nice economic tailwind for most folks in many industries, and now obviously quick deterioration in business and opportunities and things like that. So it is an opportune time to get in front of your trusted advisor, and hopefully your banker is that. If they're not, we're going to talk about some things to hopefully make them a trusted advisor. Our role as a CPA firm, we spend a lot of time with our small business clients together with their banker. We think that's a very, it's a great approach because it helps the communication. It helps the information be most useful for the banker. And frankly, in today's world, the banks, much like they were in the Great Recession, are very concerned about their customers' well-being. The good ones certainly reach out and try to assist, but others are more hands-off, and you really probably don't hear from them unless you contact them. So with that, I want to go through some areas of risk that we frequently see with our clients with regard to their bank relationship. There's a number of different structures that we see with lines of credit, for example. Many of them, if you look at the documents, can be somewhat confusing. There are different ways to structure that line of credit. A lot of them are on demand, which carries entirely different risk than if it's a committed line of credit with a specific maturity date. So those can mean two very different things. So I don't know, does anybody in the audience have any experience or knowledge with regard to their potential or their line of credit structure, how that might look, or folks that have a line of credit? Any feedback there? None? Okay. Um, these are things that you should address, though, with the bank, just to understand how that is written. Because if it's a demand line, the issue that you get into right now with the financial deterioration that we see in many industries is that the banks get uncomfortable and all of a sudden cut off access to that credit availability. So you want to make sure that you understand exactly how that is structured, because they can mean very different things, as we mentioned. With regard to a guarantee, what we're talking about there is specific to the personal guarantee that is included with most all small business loan documents, including all of the typical SBA loans outside of what we're seeing now with many of the EIDL and PPP loans. But traditional bank loans and traditional SBA loans typically carry a personal guarantee of some kind. There are different facets to that. They can be limited in terms of a specific dollar amount that's personally guaranteed. They can be continuing, which means they are ongoing and carry past that specific loan itself. So that can be certainly a little more risk that you need to be aware of. They can also be secured. By that, we mean there can be personal assets that are actually pledged as a part of that guarantee. Also, there are certain guarantees that can be negotiated where you've got a spouse or primary residence exclusion from that guarantee. Obviously, those are favorable. Those are the kinds of things that if you're a business owner, you want to make sure that you try to do the best you can to have somebody looking out for your best interest with regard to that. So I would encourage you all, again, to examine those documents, take a look at what you've got there. Collateral, we see this frequently as well. A lot of times folks don't understand or don't recognize that there can be collateral from outside ventures that is commingled with perhaps the primary business loan. We see this a lot of times with our smaller business clients. Perhaps they have real estate that is outside of the business. And if you're not careful, that real estate collateral can be commingled with the operating business collateral. So you want to just make sure, again, not that any of that is something that you necessarily want to avoid. You just want to understand what your risk is and what part of your personal assets and your personal balance sheet, in essence, are a part of each specific loan agreement. Covenant definitions, I don't want to get too much down in the weeds here, but these can be very nuanced. And I would highly, highly recommend that you take a look at what covenants and what language there is contained within your bank documents, because a lot of these can sound very similar, but they can actually be very different and mean very different things. Debt service coverage, for example, typically only includes the cash flow of the business and how well that covers the debt obligations. However, those debt obligations may include all debt obligations, even outside of what you have with that specific bank or that specific loan. Fixed charge coverage, which sounds very similar, also has some additional add-ons, however, and it may include cash that you spend on other assets, for example. So there can be a lot of things contained within these definitions that are very, very nuanced and mean very different things. So I would encourage you very much so, again, to sit down with not only your accountant, but the banker together so that make sure that you can provide the right information, that you understand the definitions, and that you can track these as you go and that way you have some idea as to ahead of time where you might run into some difficulties and address those situations before they become problems after the fact. Bankers and CPAs always love if you are prepared and you know that, okay, things may change. Maybe, this isn't what I expected in terms of financial results coming this year because of market conditions. Let's get ahead of that and talk amongst ourselves, the bank and the CPA, and you, the customer, as to what we can do ahead of time to address and change any of those things rather than have a problem after the fact. So, very important there. Other hidden risks, again, you want to look for the language in those documents. There oftentimes are some very nuanced things that are contained there, such as a material adverse change clause or change in control and change in ownership, sometimes as little as a small 1% or so change in ownership that you might gift to your children or bring in other family members in a business can have an impact in terms of a default within those agreements. Even though it's not what we would call material to it, you still want to address those with the bank up front so that you can all be on the same page and communicate as best you can. Decision making, this is critical. You want to understand the individual banker that you deal with, where they stand in the hierarchy within their institution, how many layers they have to go through to make a decision that can impact your business or you personally. Is it the case where perhaps they get together in a committee setting once a week, or is it perhaps just a couple of signatures from officers at the bank that can make those changes? Where and how those decisions are made are very critical. I'm dating myself a little bit here, but if you go back even 15 or 20 years, those decisions could be made pretty very, very flatly within an organization. That's not often the case anymore. Certainly post Great Recession in 2008, 2009, a lot of that decision making changed. So with that, we'll just take a quick pause. Anybody have any questions or concerns related to bank relationship at all that they want to discuss or bring up? Okay. Seeing nothing, that's fine. We will have, again, contact info at the end as well, that you can feel free to reach out to us individually to discuss these items too. So PPP loan, maybe show of hands or something for those that I can see on screen anyway. Do we have folks online today that received a PPP loan? Anyone? Yes or no? Okay, well, we'll go over this then just briefly. The PPP loan program is still active, so I would encourage those of you that can, if you have not, to try to go apply. And as a reminder, the PPP loan program is available even if you are a sole proprietor or Schedule C filer with your tax return, or if you are simply a 1099 recipient, you are eligible to apply for the PPP loan, and there really is no downside to doing so. Again, I would encourage everybody to try to go do that. They continue to make tweaks to this program. I think that continue to make it more and more favorable for potential borrowers. So really, I think a very attractive way to get funds in your hands as a small business owner or sole proprietor, or again, even a 1099 recipient individually, to try to help folks through this period. And they continue to loosen the standards for forgiveness with regard to this as well. So I would encourage everybody to take a look at that. Again, since we don't have a lot of folks that are in the PPP program itself, again, what we're looking at here is kind of standard SBA loan stuff. They just want to dot the I's, cross the T's, make sure that everything is signed, dated, filled out properly. But they really are trying to be flexible with this program in terms of the forgiveness and the ability for small businesses, sole proprietors, and the like to get government assistance funds in your hands, and then those funds are forgiven. So we won't spend any time getting down into the weeds of this because of the audience we have today. But again, feel free to reach out with any specific questions on this issue. Again, this relates to some of the documentation and risk mitigation around that. But again, given the audience, we won't spend a lot of time in that today. But essentially treated much like it would any sort of tax preparation or bank loan application. You've got to document what you've done, what you're doing, business records, those types of things, cash flow, cash projections, budgets, all that type of stuff. That's all good information to have. Makes life easier for your CPA, your banker, and everybody in between. So the lesson is be a good record keeper. And I know Renee will get into some of this with the HR issues as well. And with that, I will stop sharing my screen and let her get into her portion, which frankly is more important as we all get back to work here post restrictions. So with that, go ahead, Renee.
Actually,
Thank you, Doug,
we have a question.
We have a question.
We did get a question in the chat from Melissa. Melissa has some questions about the PPP. She wants to know, how does forgiveness work? She's seasonal and weather-related business.
Yes.
Her question's actually kind of long, so my chat box disappeared when that happened. She says that they are a seasonal and weather-related business. They have their staff working as many hours as possible, but that cannot always be full-time. Is that going to affect or forgive? And how will PPP funds affect our EIDL grant?
So, okay, if two separate questions. Yes, the Economic Injury Disaster Loan, which was sort of the first available program under the CARES Act time. If you received a $10,000 EIDL grant, all that does is reduce your PPP loan forgiveness by that amount. There is a provision in the application that makes allowance for that. It doesn't preclude you from applying for both, and I would in fact encourage you to certainly apply for the PPP. There is an allowance in how the FTE numbers are calculated and the payroll numbers are calculated within the PPP loan program. So it is very accommodating to seasonal employers, such as certain construction-related businesses or landscape businesses, whatever the case might be. So they do allow a lot of flexibility to accommodate those businesses and in essence not penalize you for the way you employ that staff and the FTE measurements. They try to make them, in essence, apples to apples and make them very fair and forgiving in that regard. So once you get into that, again, my contact information will be at the end. You can reach out to me directly. We can get into specific facts and circumstances there. But again, I would encourage you to go ahead and apply, and it is very accommodating.
Thank you, Doug. We appreciate you taking the time and sharing your information. Welcome, everyone. And I just want to be sure, are you able to see my screen? Okay, I'm assuming that is a yes.
Yes, we can see it, Renee.
Okay, thank you. So again, thank you for taking time we have a lot of information to cover with you today. Please know that a lot of this information we will contain and include resource links for you at the end of this presentation, as we understand there's a lot of info and a lot of moving parts. As you and many employers are feeling right now, there is a lot of change and a lot of information out there. So basically, we just wanted to touch base on the main topics of the Family First Coronavirus Response Act that I'm sure everyone has heard about. And that is the legislation that went into effect April 1st of this year to provide employees the ability to request leave for criteria that they would meet in response to COVID-19. So again, we won't go into all of these in specifics, but the two major acts include the Emergency Family Medical Leave expansion and the Emergency Paid Sick Leave, which are both in addition to the existing Family Medical Leave policy that has been in existence since the late 80s. So what we'd like to look at next is talk through, my slide is moving here. So what, as an employer, do you need to ensure that you're doing for employees that would be requesting leave? First of all, from a record retention rate, any leave request for COVID-19 related leaves should be documented and kept on file by the employer for 4 years from the date of the leave. That is best to keep that information together as we move forward through this process. A couple of things for you from an employer perspective is please be sure that you have an FFCRA leave request form that you're documenting when those employees are requesting leave. And we at Rea do have a template that we're happy to share if you need that as well. And also ensure that your workplace has the postings up so your employees are aware of the FFCRA regulations as well. And again, this notification can also be virtual due to those individuals that might still be continuing to work remotely. As we mentioned earlier, we're just going to touch base on the emergency family medical leave for all employers that have 500 employees or less. And these are eligible leaves for employees that have been there at least 30 calendar days with the employer. And again, there's criteria for each one, but basically it is for employees that need to take the leave because they are either sick themselves, due to COVID-19, they're taking care of a family member, they are under a quarantine, which has been lifted, of course, for us now. But the big piece of this moving forward is employees that will continue to be taking care of their children. We're not sure what the fall is going to look like from a school perspective. So eligible employees that meet the criteria of needing to care for a child at home would qualify for this leave moving forward. And specifically, again, a lot of information with the leave, but if you're looking at the emergency paid sick leave, individuals are eligible for 2/3 of their rate, up to 200 per day, providing, again, that they meet the criteria set forth in the laws. Part of also what we want to talk about as employers are moving forward and welcoming their employees back into the workforce. I'm sure all of us in HR have heard of the ADA, the Americans with Disabilities Act. There's a lot of discussion around this right now for employers to more so be aware of if an employee were to come into your organization and say that they are not able to work because of COVID and it's related to a disability that they have. This information that we've shared here, and we have a website that you can access as well, provides guidance from the EEOC that states the employer can have a conversation with your employee about, number one, how does this disability create a limitation? How the requests from the accommodation will effectively address what their limitation is. Also look at whether or not an accommodation can solve the issue. And this is key here. We're going back to our job descriptions for organizations, ensuring that your job descriptions have those essential functions listed. So in the event that there is a request for an ADA accommodation, that you have those job essential functions outlined. And this is the site. And again, we'll provide you with the slide deck as well. But this is the information that we just talked through about resources for you as the employer if you would need to have a discussion in reference to ADA and employees returning to work. So let's talk about everyone and the questions that we're hearing a lot of. I'm sure organizations are now calling individuals back from work or from unemployment, because you have eligible work for them. The increased employment compensation, both at a state and federal level, has afforded the opportunity for some employees to state that they can make more staying on unemployment versus coming back to work. So what can you as the employer do when you have work available and you're trying to recall these employees who might not want to come back? What can you legally do from that perspective? So we have outlined here some brief resources for you and best practices to do this. So obviously calling your employee and talking verbally with them and letting them know we have work available now. We'd like you to return, for example, Monday, June 1st. We also, as a best practice, recommend that you as the employer just have a recall letter that just states we as the employer are calling you back effective Monday, June 1st. We request that you return to work. This also will provide documentation for you, the employer, should the employee decide they are not returning. And what does that look like from an unemployment documentation standpoint? This will help you to be able to provide that information to the unemployment office. And again, this letter should be either sent home or mailed to them directly. And we do have a website here at the end of this presentation that will provide you with a resource as well. And again, keep in mind that in talking with your employees, it's okay to let them know that we have work available for you, and should you not return, that can negate your ability to continue to receive unemployment. So that's very important that they know that as well. So as we have gone through all the legislative updates and new policies, new procedures, new PPE, what can you as the employer do to help mitigate risk for your organization? And what else can you do to ensure that your employees have a consistent message as to policies? And that goes to the employee handbook. Employers should look at their handbooks now and ensure that they are updated to reflect policies that we'll be talking about here soon. That they also, anything that you have contained within your employee handbook is a policy that can help mitigate risk for any potential employee lawsuits or disputes coming down the road. And we have on here, we say Exhibit A, and this is from, years of being in HR, and anytime there would be a type of lawsuit or employment matter, you'll hear from your attorney that they'll want to see what your handbook is. So what does your handbook state? So it's very important that you're consistent and you have that updated. So as we talk about the policies, what are some of the new policies that we should be putting into your handbook as a result of the coronavirus? A couple of them definitely include as we talked about, the new paid leaves, the FFCRA, and also the Family Medical Leave Act, and how do those two work together, and what does that mean? We talked about the ADA, the Americans with Disabilities Act. That's essential to have in your handbook as well. Also, pandemic and emergency preparation. Is your company ready? I'm sure if you would have asked all of us a year ago, would we think we'd be in the middle of a pandemic? Having procedures and outlines in place as to what to do is also crucial. Attendance, this is important as well. How do the leaves interact with your attendance policy, and being sure that there's consistency there? And paid time off for vacation, how do you have it defined that if a person needs to take a leave of absence, do they need to take their paid time off first? So again, these are a few of the policies that you'll want to look at and update as well. From a safety perspective, you're looking at having new PPE requirements in the workplace, everything from either masks to additional safety guidelines for social distancing. So ensuring that you're training your employees and they know where the PPE material is, they know where the hand sanitizer is, they know where the resources are for them to keep them safe in your organization. And accident reporting process and bloodborne pathogens, those are key to ensure that you have in your handbook as well. As we move forward and you welcome employees back into your workplace, and obviously a lot of individuals are still concerned of, how is my employer keeping me safe? Is it safe for me to go to work? And these are national questions, and as long as companies continue to adhere to CDC guidelines, provide communication to their employees of, here's what our safety protocols are to keep you safe, here's what our PPE requirements are. Also ensuring that you document that you've had these discussions with your employees from a safety perspective. Does not need to be a 2-hour-long safety meeting, but it can be a very simple bringing everyone together to share, here's the resources and the policies and locations of what we've talked about before. And having them sign that they attended that meeting will also help from a documentation standpoint. And also ensure that your workplace has posted the required labor postings in reference to the CDC guidelines. And if you do have questions in reference to what those are, please feel free and reach out to me. My contact information is here at the end of this presentation. So so I would like to throw a question out to everyone. Have a majority of you brought your individuals back into the workplace in the last week or two? And I'm not able to see any of the chat results, but I'm assuming and hoping that everyone is starting to return and bring their individuals back in. That opens up the next topic of discussion, which we want to be sure that we address as these questions are continuing to come in from my contacts and just other discussions, throughout the state. Some employers are asking, what happens if we have an employee that tests positive for COVID, and is it an OSHA recordable injury? Is it an illness that we need to put on our OSHA log? There is new guidance that became effective Tuesday, May 26th, where OSHA has come out with criteria to show if and when a COVID-19 case is recordable. And the website that you see listed here will provide you with the criteria to state whether or not that is in fact a recordable injury. Did they sustain it? Were they exposed to it at work? So, and again, this website that you'll look at, the OSHA recordable illness is only recordable if all of the following criteria are met: that the case is a confirmed case of COVID, or the person is under care for the presumption that they have COVID, that the case is work-related, that it's defined by the regulations that you see cited there, and it involves either medical treatment beyond first aid or days away from work. So again, please utilize these resource sites for OSHA. They update them frequently to ensure that employers have information, as this is a hot topic right now that a lot of companies are inquiring about. And this is another question that I've received from a lot of individuals and a lot of companies of, can an employee refuse to come to work because they're afraid of contracting the virus? And, we understand as employers that, it's an unprecedented time, and we always want to ensure that our employees have a safe workplace. And, your response to that is the employees are required to come into work unless they feel that they are in imminent danger. And what does that imminent danger mean? So that discussion and that definition is actually shared here on this website for OSHA as well. As long as you, the company, are providing documentation on trainings, and sharing communication with your employees to help them know that you care and that you're taking care of them also helps as well. But just again, something for you to be aware of. Workplace safety best practices. We could talk about this for the rest of the afternoon, but from a time perspective, we just want to be sure that you have the resources as well as an employer in reference to the required mask wearing, the required daily assessments for temperature taking, maintaining good hygiene, cleaning and sanitizing your locations, and also abiding by the capacity regulations as companies start to open. So again, we've provided you with additional website here that has free postings for you, and also the ability for you to answer any questions or ask questions if you wish to speak to someone as well. So just a lot of new things that we're not used to doing that I guess is our new norm now. So it's just important that we adhere to these. As we continue to move forward, obviously, how can we continue to ensure our employees are engaged? Some companies are still continuing and will continue to have remote workers for a period of time. And what does that look like? And how do we keep in contact with those remote workers? And how can we ensure that they feel that they're still a part of the team? And best practices can be very simple, from a manager or a supervisor checking in with that employee each week. Taking meetings as we're doing this particular virtual webinar, utilizing technology as well. Continued communication to our employees that are coming back into the workforce is essential. As they come back in, you need to ensure that you're continuing to adhere and address their concerns. There's a lot of information out there on the internet. There are a lot of audits going on right now within the state and throughout the nation, where employees, if they're not feeling safe, they're not afraid to contact OSHA or make a complaint. So again, it's just being aware and keeping your employees communicated with and answer their questions. And also, a lot of employees have been dealing with, as individuals, a lot of uncertainty. Some could continue to have financial issues and childcare issues they're dealing with. So if you have an EAP program at your organization, please feel free and share and reinforce to your employees that that's available to help them as we continue to move through the next course of what we're doing. And again, ensure that they have a contact. If it's yourself, if it's a manager, their supervisor, be sure that they have a direct line of communication, that if they have questions, they can feel comfortable and reach out to you. So that is a lot of information I know that we have provided to you. The next couple slides will contain links and resources for you that we would request that you continue to visit. Rea Associates, we have an internal task force that has created a COVID-19 resource center on our webpage that is updated daily with all of the updates pertaining to PPP programs, HR. So a great resource for you as well. And as we continue to move through, if you do have questions, Doug and I do have, our contact information here at the end of this presentation. But these are basically a few of the resources that you can utilize as well. And I think we'll see if we have any additional questions or go from there.
Thanks, Renee. That was a great job with going through a lot of detailed information. So, that's it's a challenge to keep up with all that. I guess I would, in a former life, let's say I was a private industry CFO who also had HR responsibility, which I will tell you I was wholly unqualified for, and would have loved to have had an expert like Renee that I could call up and rely on, because there are just so many complex and constantly changing things to keep up with. So I try to stick to my area of expertise and rely on other folks to help me out. And if there's one thing I've learned over my career, it is for sure that, not try to do too many things.
And I think too, Doug, you said it exactly. There's so much going on and there's so many changes and it's moving so quickly. And I think initially, a month and a half, 2 months ago, everyone was feeling very overwhelmed of what do we need to do. And so again, resources, we're happy to be there. We're also happy to help with handbook updates. And a lot of companies now are realizing, wow, we wish we would have done this a year ago, but who would have known where we are now? So
Right.
Resource wise, there's a lot of information out there. And I do tell individuals, please be sure that you're looking at credible sources, that you're utilizing the resources that we have shown. Not everything's true on Facebook. Not everything's true on Yahoo. So I always tell everyone, consider the source and be sure you're looking at accurate information too. It's important.
Great point. So I don't see any questions at this point, but so I just have a quick comment to make. I am actually an HHS grad, class of 85. Even though I have not been back, I must confess my family long ago left. I haven't been back there in 25 years. So I pledged to Kelsey that the next time I'm in the, certainly in the Cleveland area, which is fairly frequent, I will make a detour and check out the town. I'm sure it's changed a heck of a lot since I was last there. So can't wait to see it. I'm sure we have some longtime residents on the call today.
Well, I would just like to take the time to thank both of you, Doug and Renee. I think today's presentation was absolutely very important and timely. I'm sure that everyone will be able to take some of this information and add it to our filing cabinets of everything we need to know as everything's changing. So thank you both for your time and your dedication to passing knowledge and making sure that we have the right information to lead our business and our employees correctly. So thank you both.
Thank you for the opportunity. We appreciate it. It was a pleasure.
All right. Well, I don't see any final comments in the questions in the comments box, just a couple of people thanking both of you. So if you would like, we can go ahead and wrap it for a day. And again, thank you for coming, everyone, both the guests and our presenters. Thank you.
Thank you. Have a good day.
Thanks, you too.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.